What if you bought a semi-truck instead of putting that money in the stock market? A single truck can pull in $250,000 a year. That number is real. It's also the trap. Because revenue is not profit. That $250,000 is the headline, and the headline is engineered to make you stop calculating. On paper, a truck pulls in more money than most people make in a year. But there's a reason most of that cash never reaches the owner's pocket. And by the end of this video, you'll see exactly where every dollar of it goes. Let's start with the fantasy, because honestly, it's a good one. You own the asset outright. No boss, no corporate ladder, nobody skimming your paycheck. You pull up a digital load board and you see rates that look like $2, sometimes $3 a mile. You do the quick napkin math. 10,000 miles a month times a couple of dollars a mile, and the number gets big, fast. People see that gross figure and they stop calculating right there. That's the pitch, and it is seductive. $2 to $3 a mile, 10,000 miles a month, be your own boss. It feels obvious. It feels like a machine that prints money while you sleep in the cab. Freedom and a six-figure gross, all wrapped in chrome and diesel. So, let's actually buy one. Let's follow every single dollar, from the signature on the dealership lot all the way to the bank account, and see what's actually left standing at the end. First, the cost to enter. A used Class 8 sleeper, 3 to 5 years old, runs roughly $70,000 to $110,000. We'll use $100,000 as our working example. Clean, round, and realistic. Lenders want 10 to 20% down. On a $100,000 truck, that is $10,000 to $20,000 out of your pocket before the wheels even turn. And owner-operator financing is not cheap. Rates commonly land between 8 and 15%, depending on your credit and how old the truck is, on terms of 4 to 5 years. Run the example. Finance $85,000 at 12% over 5 years, and you're looking at roughly an $1,890 monthly payment. Here is the part that matters most. That note is due whether the truck moves or not. Sick day, slow week, blown engine, the payment does not care. The note never sleeps. And the industry has a name for this: ATRI. The American Transportation Research Institute pegs lease and purchase payments at about 29 cents per mile. That's before you burn a single gallon of diesel. Now the fun part, the revenue engine. Owner-operators get paid by the mile, and spot rates swing hard with the freight market. In strong years, dry van rates ran well over $2.50 a mile. Then the 2023 to 2024 freight downturn hit, and rates slid toward $1.60 to $2 a mile, including the fuel surcharge. But here's the first thing the fantasy leaves out. Not all your miles pay. There are two kinds: loaded miles, where you're hauling freight and getting paid, and deadhead miles, driving empty to your next pickup, which pay you absolutely nothing. Deadhead typically runs 10 to 20% of your total miles. So a truck lodging 10,000 total miles a month might only bill on 8 to 9,000 of them. Empty miles still cost you. A working owner-operator drives roughly 100,000 to 130,000 miles a year. So let's build the gross. 120,000 miles times about $1.85 a mile comes out to around $222,000 a year gross. There it is. That's the fantasy number. Hold on to it, because we're about to take it apart, dollar by dollar. Where does the gross go? This is the teardown. And our guide is ATRI's per-mile cost structure, which added up to about $2.25 per mile. Start with fuel, the single biggest variable cost. A loaded Class 8 gets 6 to 7 miles per gallon. At diesel, around $4 a gallon, that's roughly 60 to 65 cents a mile. ATRI puts it at 64.6 cents. Over 120,000 miles, that is about $78,000 a year gone to fuel alone. Next, insurance. Under your own authority, primary liability plus cargo coverage runs $12,000 to $25,000 a year. Call it $18,000. Then repairs and maintenance. Oil, brakes, and the ones that hurt. A rebuilt engine can run $20,000 to $40,000. A transmission, $8,000 to $15,000. A single after-treatment repair, $3,000 to $5,000. Budget around $23,000 a year, and you're being honest. Tires. A full set of drives and steers is $4,000 to $6,000, and they wear out every 60 to 100,000 miles. Then the paperwork costs, permits, licenses, IFTA fuel tax, IRP plates, and the Federal Heavy Vehicle Use Tax, Form 2290, $550 a year. And you are not booking those loads for free. A dispatcher takes 5 to 10% of your gross to find and book freight. Factor your invoices for faster cash, and that's another 1 to 3%. Added up, money leaks by the mile. Fuel, $78,000. Insurance, $18,000. Repairs, $23,000. Tires, $5,000. Permits and taxes, $4,000. Dispatcher, $16,000. That $222,000 gross shrinks fast, and what's left before income tax lands somewhere in the ballpark of $50,000 to $70,000. And you still owe 15.3% self-employment tax on top of your income tax. The $250,000 was never yours. Most of it was always spoken for. Now let's break something, because reality always does. It's a slow freight month. Rates are down to $1.60. And on day 9, the engine throws a code. The truck goes into the shop for 2 weeks. Zero revenue. Nothing coming in. But the $1,890 payment? Still due. Insurance? Still due. The plates don't refund you for downtime. The repair bill comes back at $18,000. So you either drain your cash reserve or you put it on a card at 20% plus interest. And this is the part nobody films. When the money does come in, look at who gets paid first. The broker already took their cut between the shipper and you, then the lender, then the insurer, then the fuel company, then the shop. Every one of them gets paid before the owner sees a single dollar. Owner gets paid last. You took all the risk, and you're at the back of the line. So, is it hopeless? No. The truck can absolutely work, but the operators who make it pay don't think in gross revenue. They think in cost per mile. They know their number cold, say $1.50 to $1.80 all in, and they refuse any load that pays below it. They chase better lanes. They cut deadhead by booking backhauls, so they're not driving empty. They kept a cash reserve of $10,000 to $20,000, so one breakdown doesn't end the whole business. They fuel strategically, using fuel network discounts, and they maintain the truck on schedule to dodge that $30,000 surprise. Know your cost per mile. It is the entire game. Run it that way, and realistic owner take-home lands around $50,000 to $70,000 a year, sometimes more with high miles and tight cost control. That's a real income. But be clear about what it costs you. It is a full-time, 60 to 70-hour job, governed by federal hours of service limits. 11 hours driving inside a 14-hour window, 70 hours over 8 days. You don't just own the truck owns your calendar. So, let's go back to the opening question. You had roughly $15,000 for a down payment and years of 60-hour weeks to spend. What if you put that same capital and effort somewhere else? Take a plain index fund. The S&P 500 has averaged about 10% a year nominally over the long run. No engine to rebuild, no 3 a.m. calls from a shop in another state. It's passive. The truck is a second full-time job. So the honest comparison was never truck versus stock market on the gross. It's $50,000 to $70,000 of hard-earned owner income for 70-hour weeks and real breakdown risk versus a passive return that asks nothing of your body. Those are different products entirely. And to be clear, this is educational, not financial advice. Here is the takeaway. A semi-truck is a real asset, but it behaves like a small business, not a savings account. The gross is a headline. The cost per mile is the truth. $222,000 of gross becomes around $60,000 of owner income and a full-time job to earn it. A semi-truck can be an asset, but only if you run it like a business, and only if you count every mile before you count the money. There's one more cost the fantasy never mentions, and it's the quietest one. The truck is dying while you drive it. Depreciation. That $100,000 asset does not hold its value. A Class 8 sleeper loses roughly 10 to 15% of its worth every year. Faster if you're stacking on high miles. So the truck that cost you $100,000 today might be worth 55, maybe 60, 3 years from now. That gap is real money, even though you never write a check for it. It just evaporates off the resale value, silently, mile after mile. And here's the trap inside the trap. The harder you run the truck to hit that big gross, the faster you burn down the very asset you borrowed against. You're converting equipment into cash, and the equipment doesn't grow back. Then there's time, and specifically time you don't get paid for. Detention. You show up at a shipper for your appointment, and the freight isn't ready. You wait 2 hours, 4 hours, sometimes an entire day, sitting at a dock. Most contracts don't start paying detention until after the first 2 free hours, and even then it's maybe $25 to $50 an hour, if the broker honors it at all. Many don't. But that clock you're burning at the dock is also burning your federal hours of service window. Every hour parked is an hour you can't drive later. So detention doesn't just cost you the wait, it costs you the miles you can no longer legally run that day. The load you were going to pick up tonight, gone. You're out of hours. That's revenue that simply vanishes because someone else was slow. And consider the newer operator, the one who leased on to a carrier to avoid the cost of their own authority. It sounds safer. The carrier handles insurance, dispatch, and compliance. But they take a cut, often 25 to 30% off the top, and they control which loads you see. You've traded the risk for a smaller ceiling, and you're back to being a passenger in your own business. There's no free version of this. Either you carry the overhead and the risk yourself, or you hand a large slice of the gross to someone who will. The margin gets eaten one way or the other. Every path through this industry ends at the same math, and the math does not flinch.